Hello.
Hi, Frank. How's it going?
Hey, yeah, good. Thanks. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah. Are you at home?
I am at home. Yes.
How is home life these days?
It's very nice, thank you. I moved house 18 months ago out to Essex, and which is a turn up for the books. The sea is about 150 meters in that direction, and that's pretty nice.
Nice. So, obviously, we all know that you moved out of London. You've even written a song about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that you had a few comments about the fact that you were moving to London, you're getting married, like settling down in inverted commas. Now, obviously, these are dumb comments, but people have said that it's going to affect your songwriting.
Sure.
Do you respond to those kind of comments, or do you just put out an album like this one?
That's a good question. I mean, the first thing is, it does affect my songwriting. Of course it does, because I write in an autobiographical way, and, so changes in my life will affect my songwriting. And I don't want my songwriting to stay the same forever. That's a ridiculous idea. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that would be boring. And I want my songwriting to grow and evolve, and I don't want to repeat myself. I think that when the comment that you're talking about becomes annoying is when people kind of assume that my songwriting will become less interesting or become somehow sort of toothless or whatever, because of changes in my life. And people are entitled to their opinions, but I think that first of all, the idea that somebody's songwriting is going to become boring because they got married is not very secretly a misogynist thing to say, and it's exclusively men who make that comment, I might add. I'm 40 years old now, and I think that there's something undignified about me writing songs pretending that I'm 25, because it's just not true. And there is a rash of bands and writers who write songs about high school when they're comfortably into their 30s and their 40s, which I just think is slightly fake, personally. And I don't want to be one of them. And my interest in terms of other songwriters, that's part of the reason I love like Loudon Wainwright III or Nick Cave or whatever, is these people who write about the different phases of life. There are understandable reasons why a lot of pop music is focused on the ages of sort of 16 to 25, but because it's quite an exciting time to be alive, but it's not the only time any of us ever live, and I'm interested in talking about other phases of life as well.
Yeah, but like as I kind of touched on, if somebody puts on this new record and plays this first song on Servium, it feels like you're kind of going, well, take that.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. There is a degree of that in there. Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult because on the one hand, in terms of the endless well of critics that is social media or whatever, I don't want to spend my life reacting to that particularly. Do you know what I mean? But it is quite nice to be able to kind of go, oh yeah, I can also do this, by the way. There were quite a few people my previous two records were within my own musical universe, sort of a bit more experimental. I did like an electro pop record, basically, and then I did a history podcast album, if you can believe that. And there was a murmuring that I was aware of that I perhaps somehow kind of lost my mojo or some shit from people who are into one specific type of music only, which is the type of music that I'm also into. Do you know what I mean? But it's quite nice to be able to go, I can also do this, and in fact I also enjoy doing this. And yeah, it's I wanted this record to come out of the gates with its teeth bared.
Yeah, and it definitely does that. And there's a few heavier moments on this record for you. Do you ever worry about alienating some of the people that grew up knowing you just as an acoustic singer-songwriter?
Not really, no. I think that one of the things I've learned over the years is that when things go well in my career, it's when I'm focused on my own best judgment and nothing else. I'm not sitting here saying that I've necessarily ever fully pandered to anybody, whether that be the fans or the label or whatever. But there's definitely moments in your life when your kind of prospective audience when you write kind of varies a little bit, and the best stuff I write is when I write for my own best judgment and for what I think is right and don't give a fuck about what anybody else has to say. And that's a thing I've learned over the years, and I think at this moment in time it's this is the music I want to make. And I'm sure there are some people who aren't going to enjoy a song like My Bad who might enjoy The Way I Tend to Be or something, and I get that. That's perfectly legitimate, but I've played The Way I Tend to Be live a lot, and I probably will again.
So when you're making an album like this and you've said this is you write with a I don't give a fuck kind of attitude, I'm going to do what I want, and then it goes to number one in the charts, That must be like extra gratifying.
Yeah, definitely. And like particularly when, like I was interested to note that like we didn't get any radio play of this record on the BBC. And when they announced the chart, there was a genuine like audible sense of grudge in the countdown. And they played 10 seconds of one song and then switched back to Ed Sheeran again. That I don't get played on the radio anymore in this country. I did once upon a time, not anymore. I'll get over it. But apparently, I don't need it to get to the top of the charts. So fuck them. But yeah, I mean, I feel very. It's funny because 16-year-old me took pride and even a sense of identity in hating the charts. Do you know what I mean? And like I didn't know who was in the charts. And I didn't like any of them, and blah blah blah. I grew up in the midst of Britpop. Forgive me. So. It is a bit of a switch, but it does feel like an achievement, and I'm glad that of all the records I've made, it is this one that has hit that achievement, because it is perhaps the most uncompromising solo record that I've made.
Yeah, and that's going to encourage other people maybe to just go, well, he can do it. I'm just going to do it my way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good feeling to have done this on my own terms. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So the lyrical concept on this album is, you've always been a personal songwriter, but there's some very personal subjects on this album.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really interested in this line, I sold my soul to rock and roll in a desperate throw to even be noticed at all, which is kind of a throwback to how you grew up and your family life growing up.
Yeah.
Has being a musician and being a successful musician changed your relationship with your family, and of the lyrics on this album had an effect on how you relate to people in your family?
Yeah, we'll come to the second part of that second. I mean, that line specifically, there was an interview that Springsteen gave a long time ago in which he said the majority of rock and roll is somebody standing on a stage shouting, "Look at me, Dad." And I read that and thought, oh, fucking hell, man. Like, I felt very seen when I read that. And that was one of the germinating seeds for that particular song. But I mean, has it changed? I don't know. I've been a musician for my entire adult life. I think that at the beginning my parents weren't in favor of it, and I was banned from going to shows and buying records and stuff when I was a young kid, and then I would just sort of go off and play shows on my own time. I kind of stopped going home when I was about 16 anyway, and then there was a moment in time when Million Dead broke up. My parents, I think, were like, well, that's done with, and now he'll go and get a real job, kind of thing. And instead I picked up an acoustic guitar and started playing to like 100th the number of people. The last Million Dead show, there were 800 people there. The first solo show, there were 2, and they were both on my guest list. It was, and that was a moment of real concern, I think, for my mum particularly. I think that my mum's kind of got on board with it these days. I think she understands that I have a career, I have a serious job, I pay my way in life, and all this kind of shit. I think that playing the Olympic Open ceremony helped with that campaign, because that was, I mean, I'm sort of joking, but I'm sort of not. I mean, that was something that was within her frame of reference. You know what I mean? My mum doesn't know anything about rock and roll. She doesn't, and never did growing up. My mum barely knows who the Beatles are. Do you know what I mean? So, I'm now of an age where I can sort of have a bit more sympathy looking back with my parents on how things were when I was a kid. But yeah, I mean, this is who I am nowadays. I mean, fingers crossed I'll be able to do this for a while yet. Who fucking knows? I hope so. But, that's who I am and what I do. The new record, I mean, there is a degree to which my family have got used to the fact that I spill my guts for a living. And when I put out a record, there's usually a bit of a kind of, oh, for fuck's sake, what's he gone and said now? But at the same time, obviously, given the more personal nature of this and talking about my childhood and my dad and all the rest of it, I mean, ahead of time, I had some pretty hefty conversations with my sisters and with my mum, and of course with my dad, about some of the songs on the record. And more so than it has been for a few records, that hasn't always been the easiest, should we say? Because this is an interesting thing. The record contains a discussion and indeed a celebration of my dad's transition, but I think that my mother feels a little left behind by that, and also that, like, to some extent, some of her kind of personal business is getting aired in public in a way. So we've had some difficult conversations about that. But I love my mum to pieces, and I think she loves me too.
I'm sure she does. You're a semi-newly married man, but you have a lot of breakup songs. How do you feel you can still go out and sing those and relate to them? How does that work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can remember how it felt, and also, I mean, to me, a song's most interesting moment is when it sort of ceases to be purely my property and it becomes a place of coming together between me and the audience. You know what I mean? And I know that when I sing a song like "Plain Sailing Weather," that if somebody's singing along with it with their eyes closed and with their heart pounding and all the rest of it, they're not thinking about specifically what happened to me. They're clearly finding their own experience within that, and there's still value in that, in me performing that song and then finding that solace in it and connection, you know, and identity. I mean, you know, and I wrote the songs. Damn it, I'll play them. I'm also helped by the fact that my wife is also a songwriter and has lots and lots of songs about her exes. So I'm not the only one. But yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, I don't think any songwriter, any performer entirely relives the experience that a song is about every single time they sing it. I think that would be too much to ask, really. And indeed, the fact that songs change their meaning and their resonance with me, my songs, over time is interesting to me. And some of my favorite songs that I've written are the ones that I have a very different feeling about now than I did when I wrote them. I have a song called "I Am Disappeared" from my fourth record, which my interpretation of the lyrics of that song is radically different now to what it was when I wrote it. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And actually, I've spoken to a few musicians that have said over the last couple of years with what's been going on, the meaning of their lyrics seems to have taken on a meaning that's, especially with certain fans, that they didn't intend, but they actually completely celebrate.
Right, exactly. And again, you know, the exciting part for me is when listeners find new meaning in a lyric that I didn't necessarily intend to put in there. I think that's really cool. I remember years ago somebody asking Mike Patton what the lyrics to one of his songs meant, and he said they mean whatever you want them to mean. And I think that's true, and that should be true. I mean, the most extreme example of this in my experience was there's a guy in Germany who's got, like, I'm pretty sure he's got like a conspiracy theorist corkboard in his house, but he's got this sort of theory that all of my songs form one grand overarching narrative and that they're all intimately related to each other, and not just in the sense they're autobiographical, but that, like, this character is that character is this person who did this to this person. And he's got this like completely insane like a dossier, do you know what I mean? And which I've glanced at, and I told him that he was completely correct, and then kind of made my exit.
Amazing. And I know you've been recording at home now.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's good. I mean, the vast majority of what I'm doing here is recording other people's stuff, which I adore because it's a different form of creativity, first of all. You know, my lockdown project was to learn how to kind of build and run a studio and record other people's music properly. And some of that's quite boringly technical, working how to use compressors and EQ and so on and so forth. But you know, I love it because you stand in a slightly different place in the creative process, you know, and you're a facilitator more than an originator. But you know, there's a sense of passing things along, you know, when I'm working with younger bands and I say something that to me is screechingly obvious, like, why don't we try doubling the last chorus, or why don't we try singing the vocal an octave down and putting it underneath, or whatever. And younger people who haven't spent the last 20 years in studios go, wow. And I go, oh, okay, that was easy. Do you know what I mean? So there's definitely so that's kind of fun, but it's also I find it really, really inspiring as a writer, kind of in the broader sense. And you know, the world is full of boring old farts wearing faded leather jackets sitting at the back of a gig complaining that it's not like it was in my day. And the answer to that is that, well, that's because you're still going to see The Damned. You know what I mean? And like there's shitloads of exciting new music out there, and there's something so wonderful about a band or a writer or whatever in their first kind of flush of creativity, which I just find electrifying, you know. And I have a songwriter called Ben Brown who I'm making an EP with down my garden at the moment, and he's a guy, I saw him play a house party a couple of streets away from where I live now, and he was just sensational. And he had this kind of naivety, and which meant there's nothing in him that's jaded at all, and it was so exciting to me. And I was like, please, can we work on some recordings together? And he's teaching me as much as I'm teaching him, and I find that really exciting.
obviously you've had a long time without live shows, and you've definitely made the most of that time where you can.
Sure.
But you've been back. You played live again recently.
Yeah, I did a handful of shows last week. I actually had to pull the last one because I got sick. And not with COVID, irritatingly enough. So it turns out I'm too cool for COVID. But no, yeah, I feel like the live scene collectively is still very much kind of shaking off cobwebs, and there's still a mountain to climb. I mean, I know that in Canada things have been quite different to how they've been over here, right? Things have only recently opened up.
Yeah, they're just starting to loosen. Like most of my recent gigs, not that there's been many, they've been seated and masked.
Yeah, exactly.
It's starting to change. Actually, Bruce Dickinson is here tonight.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Are you going?
I'm actually going to see a band called Drug Church tonight.
Right.
You know them?
I don't know.
No. Do you know Turnstile?
Yeah, very much so.
But they're kind of turnstile. Well, they're very turnstile-ish, actually. But they have a new album, which is amazing. You should check it out. And I assume they're going to be great live. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, enjoy.
Yeah, I will. And then tomorrow I'm going to see Touche Amore.
Oh, Touche Amore. Oh, they're amazing. Yeah, they're old friends as well. Lovely guys. Yeah.
So it's happening.
Yeah, right. Well, this is it. And we're still at a point where a tour can go down if somebody tests positive and all the rest. And of course there are people, in theory everything's open here, but there are a lot of people who are still reticent about going. And there are people who are reticent about making plans in advance. And I understand that. And I want to try and be forgiving about it and all the rest of it. And of course, at no point do I want what I do for a living to be, part of the problem, a vector for transmission, or however you want to put it. Having said all of that, I want to do what I do for a living again. Do you know what I mean? We can't live like we lived the last 2 years forever. It's not economically sustainable. I don't think it's kind of spiritually sustainable either. And I do think that at some point, collectively, collectively, but also on an individual basis, you just sort of have to take the plunge a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And see what comes. And that sort of feels like where we are in the UK right now.
Yeah. So after listening to The Gathering, I have to ask, the first time you got on stage, was it biblical?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first full capacity show, because I did a bunch of the socially distanced, outdoors, masks, whatever. And they were what I could do at the time, and I'm glad I did them. But we did the first full capacity show back. We did on the first day you could do them in London. And that is a show I will not forget. The atmosphere was bananas. I can barely even describe it. And there was a moment in the middle of the show, I played a song of mine called The Ballad of Me and My Friends, which tends to get a sing along, and the whole crowd felt like they were trying to shout the building down. And I genuinely got a little emotional about the situation. And the crowd responded to this by basically just yelling encouragement at me, which unfortunately wasn't the right move on their part, because it just made me well up further, and we reached a bit of an impasse. I had to have a bit of a sit down to get my shit together. Yeah, but it was magic. It was absolutely magic.
Amazing. So with all fingers crossed, what are your plans for the rest of the year?
So I've got a European tour coming up in about a month's time, and then in the summer I'm playing all 50 US states in 50 days, which is silly, but but my idea, unfortunately, so I can't really blame it on anybody else. So doing that, and then I'm aware that a lot of people in Canada have looked askance at that tour and the fact that there are no Canadian shows on it, and the answer to that is that we're going to do something similar for Canada in the start of next year. So we will be back through when we can be.
Amazing. So it must feel pretty good to be Frank Turner at the moment.
Well, aside from basically having some disgusting chest infection of some kind, yes, things could be worse. I could complain.
Anyway, thank you very much for spending some time talking with me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and listen, next time we're through Montreal, look me up and we'll hang out and say hi.